started. Good morning, everyone. I'm Linda. I think you all know me. I appreciate you being here. Hope this Friday morning has been good for you so far. We have a wonderful guest speaker today who's going to inform us on a lot of what's happening in our state. Before we do that, I want to give you a little bit of information about our programming at Opportunity Alliance Nevada. Our Volunteer Financial Navigator program is still experiencing very robust traffic. Folks reaching out to have conversations, talk about their existing state of continued unemployment, continued inability to access the unemployment system, and hard to find routes for them into workforce retraining. Still working very closely with 211, our United Ways, all the other solution makers, including Shannon Chambers, our labor commissioner, who we're going to hear from today. We were also reached out to by Senator Cortez Masto's office. And some of you may have received an email asking for participation in review of her personal finance guide that they are working on putting together and that will be distributed at a later date. Every other Friday we have these meetings, and right now tentatively next Friday there'll be a small work session with Senator Cortez Masto's office prior to the start of our meeting, working closely with Bill Chan to get that organized and ready. As we know, the senator has a very big schedule, lots going on. I really appreciate the strong collaborative efforts that we share with that office, and want to, I see Akia is on here. Thank you for being here this morning, Akia. So with that, we don't have our wonderful Lori Martin here this morning to lead us through a moment of gratitude, unfortunately. She'll be back at our next meeting. But I want to give most of the time, all of the time, to Shannon Chambers. As I said, she's our labor commissioner in the state of Nevada. She works in a lot of different arenas. She's pinged to do a lot of the thought processes around eviction mediation, how it works through the courts, just a strong thought leader and solution maker in our state. And I asked her to come back and visit us today and give us an update on anything and everything that's going on that she can comment on, and then allow a lot of time for your questions. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Shannon. And again, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you for having me. And good morning to everyone on the call. And so it's going to be a busy day today. And so I'm kind of watching two screens as we speak, because today is first House passage in the Nevada legislature. So for those of you that are watching bills, definitely watch closely today. It's going to be a very, very busy day. And it's been a busy session already. So on the labor side, and I'm going to kind of start with that. So on the labor side, the labor commissioner in Nevada doesn't have any jurisdiction over unemployment, but it obviously spills into our office through wage claims and complaints, and obviously complains about the whole system. But what I can tell you from the labor commissioner's perspective, the good news is that the job market is picking up and getting better. The challenges there, and we are hearing it more and more from employers, is that they cannot find people. And so I've talked to at least 10 managers of companies and smaller organizations and franchises in the last probably 3 weeks, where they have positions starting at between $15 to $17 an hour, and they literally have nobody applying for them. So I'm not going to speak to what may be the cause of that, but there's a different phenomenon happening now, that employers simply cannot find people to fill positions. And so the labor commissioner as well, we license private employment agencies. So think of those as like your temporary agencies. I talk to that industry a lot too. Their business has picked up substantially over the past couple months because they're filling in those gaps of placing temporary employees in positions and jobs and different things like that. So an interesting period right now. And for those of you that, heard the governor's press conference last week, he definitely spoke about retraining and getting people back to work. And so that push is there. Whether it's just more outreach to, different sectors or to different individuals or through a group like Opportunity Alliance, but there are a lot of positions out there that are just not being filled. And again, there could be various reasons for that. Unemployment, I think it would be not accurate to deny that that's playing a role here. There are those individuals that are making more on unemployment than potentially working. Again, not saying that's not how the law is intended, but it's an interesting time right now. So obviously the labor commissioner is going to watch that, and we'll work with the organizations. We work with the chambers, we work with Job Connect. One of the issues too, and hopefully this will improve, is now that people are getting vaccinated, some of the offices like Job Connect and some of the actual job resource centers may start to reopen, so that in-person traffic where some of those people really need to go in and fill out an application, that could help improve the situation. So I know, like the labor commissioner's office, we are doing things now by appointment only and starting to kind of phase reopening and trying to help our claimants and our complainants. So hopefully that'll improve the situation. Summer always seems to be a time too when the job market picks up. And again, with the vaccinations increasing, things are opening up. May 1st is scheduled to be when the state transitions the oversight of opening to the county. So again, a lot of good news, but an interesting, like I said, kind of state of affairs right now that a lot of employers are just really struggling to find people to come to work. On the labor side as well, what we're seeing is as people come back to work, they sometimes are having trouble adjusting. So a lot of employers, good or bad, right or wrong, have kind of modified their business operations. So they may be working people different schedules than they were used to before. They may have different hours than they had before. So that is definitely generating quite a few wage claims in the labor commissioner's office. And some of you on this call have heard me say this before, but there really needs to be a re-engagement of the employer-employee relationship about work conditions, about COVID, about vaccinations, about all of those topics. And, it spills over to the labor commissioner's office, and I'll answer this question in the simplified way, but an employer can require employees to get vaccinated. And the only kind of outs of not doing that as an employee is, and it gets into disability law and religious beliefs, but that becomes then a Nevada Equal Rights Commission issue or a federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission issue. But we are seeing that now too, of I've been fired because I refused to take the vaccine. Is that allowed? Yes, it is. And I won't get into that too deeply, but we are there. And, I knew we'd get there at some point as soon as the vaccine started rolling out. So that is obviously happening. And how that spills into unemployment, that is a question for unemployment. And again, depends, case by case is the best way I'll say it. So that's kind of on the labor side. Some good news on the housing side. I don't know for those folks on the call who may not have heard, but the CFPB on the federal level is working on some new rules to basically allow forbearances to go all the way through December of 21. So any potential foreclosures wouldn't start until 22. So those rules are being worked on right now. So obviously that's good news on the housing side. The downside of that is hopefully in the new package that was passed, the American Rescue Plan, there is millions of dollars in mortgage relief. How that is going to be dispersed to the states and how that's going to roll out in Nevada, we're still waiting to see. And I work with the Nevada Housing Division very closely. So we'll see what's going to be, kind of happen in the interim. You know, obviously, just because something's in a forbearance doesn't mean that those payments stop, and doesn't mean that the servicer or the bank doesn't deserve to be paid. So how that shakes out, you know, on the other side, whether it's through refinancing, whether it's through some type of mortgage relief, Home Means Nevada will definitely be a part of that. But again, that's good news. The original forbearance period was supposed to end at the end of June. So now by extending it through the end of December, that obviously will help a lot of individuals. I should clarify that's for the federally backed loans. Now, private, you know, loans, some of those companies follow kind of what the federal government does. So hopefully they will follow along and go along with that as well. We are still seeing notice of defaults and foreclosures. So there are still some cases that, whether they're slipping through the cracks or whether they're just one of those loans that doesn't qualify for any forbearance or any relief or anything like that, we are still issuing notices to proceed with foreclosure. So that is still happening. The foreclosure mediation program is still happening. What I want to emphasize on that, and I'll kind of talk about it on the rental side too, the homeowner has to actively request to participate and has to petition the court to participate. It is not an automatic. So that is the unfortunate side of some of these programs and some of these things that are going on. While they may have started out kind of as an automatic, the homeowner or the renter still has to engage and still has to fill out the forms and still has to make sure that they're taking all the steps to get those protections. And so we see that on the foreclosure mediation side, where homeowners will say, well, I thought I was automatically enrolled in the program. No, that's not how it works. So when a notice of default is served on the homeowner, there is a form in there that specifically says you have to elect to do this. And unfortunately, some homeowners don't do that. And unfortunately, if you don't actively elect to do it within 30 days, the servicer or the bank has a right to proceed down the path of a potential foreclosure sale. So again, just want to emphasize that if you're talking to individuals and they think, well, I was automatically protected or I'm automatically enrolled in this, you know, that's not true. And while there's been a lot of federal aid through the CARES Act 1.0, CARES Act 2.0, now the American Rescue Plan, it still requires active participation by the homeowner or by the tenant. So I'll kind of jump to the rental side of things now. So the rental eviction side of things. So Home Means Nevada is the administrator of the rental eviction mediation program. As I'm sure you were all aware, we've gone through kind of 3 separate moratoriums now is kind of how I look at it. We obviously had the moratorium when COVID-19 was really raging, is the best term I can use, back March, April, May of last year. And so kind of got through that period. And then the governor issued another moratorium that essentially went through October of last year. October 15th was when that last moratorium ended. Between March and October, the Nevada legislature implemented Senate Bill 1, which established the rental eviction mediation program. So just to give you perspective, between October of last year and December of last year, we ran 1,349 cases through the rental eviction mediation program. We had a 46% rate of success in getting agreements, and then around 54% rate of non-agreements. The majority of non-agreements were that the tenant didn't show up, or the tenant had already vacated the property, or the other issue was that the rental assistance application was pending and could not be processed in an expedited manner, or for whatever reason, the tenant didn't follow through on the application. So that was an issue that we knew going back to 2020 was going to have to be dealt with and addressed. So the governor issued another moratorium last year that was supposed to extend through March 31st of 2021. And at the press conference last week, the governor notified the state and notified tenants and landlords and everybody else that he was going to extend that moratorium through the end of May of this year, and that would be the last extension of the moratorium. In conjunction with that, Home Means Nevada, working with legal aid, working with the counties, working with different organizations like Opportunity Alliance, we came up with a plan that we need to address the rental assistance piece of this, and we need to do better in getting tenants rental assistance, and we need to help the landlords to get rental assistance. The mediation process, and I know there's some bills out there right now, AB 141, Assembly Bill 141, which is going to be on a work session this morning in Assembly Judiciary at 9 o'clock. But the eviction process from the time a tenant gets a notice to the time it gets to court is typically 30 days. So by the time you actually count working days and court days, that's about 15 days. So when Home Means Nevada would get a case, sometimes we wouldn't get it until, 5 or 6 days after it had been quote unquote processed with the court. We have to get it to a mediator. We then have to figure out, does the tenant qualify for rental assistance, go through all those steps and try to get all that done in 30 days. And obviously that was a challenge. And there were some individuals that quite frankly, that was just not possible. And, the rental assistance didn't come through, and that's the best way I can say it. So the plan now, and mainly in Clark County, and, it's not as big of an issue up in Washoe County and some of the counties up in Northern Nevada, and that's just a reality. Obviously, the industry in Clark County, the tourism industry, the casino industries, they definitely were hit harder in terms of unemployment, but the volume in Clark County right now is huge. The amount of rental applications pending in Clark County is huge. However, on the good side, I was on a call the past 2 days with Clark County. They are making an effort and a targeted plan to really start going through the applications and expediting applications when needed. The issue with the moratoriums too is that it doesn't really stop anything. It just kind of freezes the action is the best way I can say it. So if there was a case in court, and they're at all different stages. So there were cases where it went to court, the tenant either didn't file what they needed to file, the actual eviction was granted. However, once the moratorium went into place, the constable couldn't go and serve the eviction notice. So you have many cases that are in different stages in the courts. So the first approach to this new plan is we've got to get those existing cases out of the court. So we are working through different lists with the courts to kind of prioritize, okay, this person actually technically once this moratorium lifts, this eviction notice and this eviction can actually happen. So let's find out if they applied for rental assistance. If they didn't, let's reach out to them. Let's try and, get some of these things figured out so that when we actually go to a mediation, there's something for the landlord and there's something for the tenant. There's still a lot of confusion, and it depends county by county and organization by organization of whether the landlord can apply for rental assistance on behalf of the tenant. It depends is the best answer I can say. I'm going to be talking to some of the organizations that represent the landlords to try and figure out ways to help them. And, they are the ones who know who's in apartment 555 or who isn't. They know if an apartment's been vacated. I mean, the time that's being spent at the court level, at the Home Means Nevada level, to go through these cases and then have somebody say, well, that tenant left 60 days ago. And again, sometimes that is just doing legwork and doing the homework, but we're really trying to figure out ways we know there's money out there. We know we need to get it in the hands of the tenant. We know we need to get it in the hands of the landlord, and it is paid to the landlord. So when it does come through, it's not paid to the tenant, it is paid to the landlord. So we're really trying to work through that. And in this time period between March and May, at the end of May, to work through these cases, to get as many of them processed, because once that moratorium does lift at the end of May, we still do expect that there will probably be in the thousands at least. And I'm not going to speculate on how many thousands, but there will be probably thousands of evictions that will still happen at the end of May. So we have to be ready for that and ready to get those people run through, again, rental assistance, organizations like Opportunity Alliance, if it's just a matter of a budget or different things like that. So I want to leave this group with the feeling that there is a plan. There are multiple people who are working on this, legal aid, the governor's office, the counties, Home Means Nevada, the courts. I mean, we're really, really addressing this and really trying to get through it, especially in Clark County. And that doesn't mean that the other counties are not getting that same attention, but they just don't have the volume. So, you know, we're really, really trying to do that. On the tenant side of things, and back to my point that they have to actively participate and they have to actively fill out those forms. So whether it's the state moratorium or whether it's the Federal Centers for Disease Control, CDC moratorium, they have to fill out that CDC declaration saying I was impacted by COVID. If they don't do that, you're not entitled to that protection. So, you know, we've seen it on the mediation side. There's plenty of tenants that they're all of a sudden one day away from eviction and they go, oh yeah, I saw that form and I didn't think I needed to fill it out. They have to fill it out. And back to my point about, and the governor emphasized this and it's in the directive, it doesn't relieve you from your responsibility to pay rent. It just means that rental assistance may pay that back rent, or if you get unemployment or some other funds come through, that you will essentially be responsible for what you didn't pay. What we're starting to see, unfortunately, too, and this is the, you know, unfortunate side of all of these issues, is we are starting to see cases that we processed last October where rental assistance came through. Say, for example, they were behind 3 months. So they were made whole for those 3 months. And the agreement was that now the tenant would start paying, you know, $500 a month going forward. We are starting to see some tenants not fulfill those agreements. So the landlord is having to go back to court and is now filing motions to enforce those agreements. So it's a, you know, it's a complicated issue. And it sounds so simple of like, oh, we'll just give rental assistance and it'll make them whole and the problem solved. The way the eligibility works for rental assistance, and especially with the new rental assistance that came out in what they call CARES 2.0, is it's based on your income level. There's a lot of different factors that they have to go through. So they look on like a month by month basis of, you know, what were you making this month? What were you not making this month? So it's not just a simple solution of, you know, we're going to get a land $10,000 and everything's going to be fine. And if only it were that simple, but it's not. And you know, I've had to learn a lot about this, and this will be something that economists and state representatives and nonprofits and everybody will look back 10 years from now and go, you know, was this the right solution and was it set up right? And again, I'm not going to comment on that, but there are definitely a lot of administrative aspects to getting this money out and making sure that it's done right. And you certainly, you know, and I hate to keep bringing that up, but, you know, everybody hears about the unemployment fraud. And so there is an inclination, including from my side at Home Means Nevada, as you really want to be careful and you want to be cautious and you want to make sure that the money's getting out to the right people. But it's a very, you know, labor intensive process. And I know your organization has helped a lot of individuals getting the right forms, loading things into the portal. It's, again, it's not easy. And, you know, I made the comment at the press conference that we need to handhold and we need to help these people. And that is what we're doing now with our new plan. Is there is a direct pipeline between Home Means Nevada, the counties, the courts, in how we process rental assistance and how those cases get done and the timeline in which they get done. So the main goal is, again, to avoid eviction, to get some of these cases out of the court, to get the landlords paid, and I'm going to say that right up front, is Homeings Nevada is neutral. You know, I've heard all sides of it, the landlords, then I've heard the other side, the tenants. I mean, the bottom line is this is the reality we're in. There's people who lost their job, they can't pay their rent, there's rental assistance available. Let's try and do that. If there's other reasons why tenants have to be evicted, then the landlord has every right to go down that legal process. And, you know, I have no issue with that, and the courts have no issue with that, but it's this big bulk of people who are kind of caught, unfortunately, in the pipeline of this. And again, like I said, with the speed of the way the eviction laws work, 30 days is really, really tight. And so maybe out of the session, there may potentially be an extension of some of the timelines to kind of allow more leeway to get that rental assistance out. But again, all the stakeholders, all the parties are really trying to target this, address this. Let's get the cases that are sitting there in court right now. Let's get those out so that at least whatever happens at the end of May, at least we can maybe start new and with a whole new batch of cases. And again, go through those cases as they come in. But, you know, the reality of it is there probably will still be thousands of evictions starting at the end of May. And again, the goal will be for all of our organizations to work together to try and help those people too, and work them through the process. But, you know, what I've heard the estimates are is, you know, probably May through July is when the bulk of the evictions will hit, and then things may stabilize and kind of steady out because the economy and the vaccination rollout and everything will be hopefully bringing us a much brighter picture in terms of the economy and all of those other issues. So that's kind of a big picture on all those issues, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Wow, Shannon, thank you. Tremendous amount of very good information, crossing over a lot of the different issues in the state. I definitely have comments and questions, but I'm gonna let others jump in. Ken has been heavily active in the chat box, and he did point out that he did a calculation, $17 per hour. It's about $32,500 annually. You know, maybe if you have 2-person household, you know, that gets you to some level of income to be able to afford things. He actually used the term maintain our lifestyle. I wonder if it even meets the bare minimum of the cost of living with the increase in rents and that type of thing. So I thought that was very good perspective. But Ken, would you like to jump in and talk about some of your other questions before I go into anything I have or offer up to others?
Yes, thanks, Linda. Yes, very quickly. What I'm curious about is, I know people are having trouble, it sounds like, still accessing these systems. So is there a way to identify the people that still can't get, 1, into the employment system, and 2, into the rental assistance system? The reason why I'm asking is, at least if we could put them on a list that they can be followed up with, I'm thinking that would help, as opposed to, it's amazing to me that people still can't access these systems by now.
So, Mr. Evans, I can't speak to the unemployment system. I mean, you know, how I approach things is, you know, I think the data is there, and especially companies that had to lay off a certain amount of people, they have to file those layoff notices. So that would be one area. But, you know, I can't truly speak to the unemployment side. On the rental assistance side, what I can tell you what we're doing is, and that's one of the conversations that I'm going to have with the apartment association and with the realtors is, you know, on that side, the landlords know who is behind. So just looking at that block of it, if we can do something with them saying, you know who's behind, give us a list, we'll take it to the county, or we'll take it to whoever we need to take it to, and run through these people, or have a nonprofit reach out to them. So there's that side of it. Once they actually hit the court, Ken, we have those lists. And that is what we are doing now, is we literally have lists of a certain amount of cases that fall in this, fall in this, fall in this. And that is what is going on now, is people are reaching out to those individuals. And what we're finding, kind of as I mentioned earlier, what we're finding is some of the tenants have been gone for 90 days. Some of them moved in with their mom, or some of them are still in the rental assistance process. Some of them didn't know about it. So we are working those lists on the rental assistance side. The unemployment side, I just can't speak to that because I don't know, I don't know what they're doing on that side. I do know the rental assistance portal. I know it's gone through several upgrades. And it's my understanding that in the next week that it's going to be another rollout. And I know they've done town halls and they've done different things. So my understanding is that that process is improving and that they are being able to process applications quicker. But Home Means Nevada, Legal Aid, the courts, and mainly Clark County, we are working rental assistance lists. So that is actively taking place. And again, I'm going to have a conversation with some of the industry groups to try and address these things before they start. Like I said, the landlords know who hasn't paid. So in my opinion, that is a good place to start.
Thank you. I'm very happy to hear that proactive measure is happening. And Linda, if it's possible, it'd be great if we could figure out through our contacts if something similar in a proactive manner is being done on the unemployment side. Thank you very much.
Agreed. Thank you, Ken, and good questions. And we're asking, I'm going to just be really honest, we ask a lot of questions every day. And unfortunately for Shannon, she's someone I turn to on a very large level, and she has been incredibly helpful, even in areas that aren't hers. I'm not really sure how to answer the unemployment issues, because there's such this extreme dichotomy on each side that we've been shown today with Shannon. Like, some employers can't find folks to come back to work because of certain issues. Since we work in financial stability and we also deal with folks coming out of poverty, sometimes, and I'm going to talk about both sides of this, people have to take the best opportunity they have at the time. And if unfortunately, in some cases, they're making more money by staying home and collecting unemployment, which allows the purchase of their groceries, which allows them to pay their rent, I can see that side of it. We have been reaching out quite frequently to figure out pathways through the barriers for the unemployment system right now. And we're going to keep asking, Ken, but right now, I don't even know what the outcomes or what's going to happen to the court case that Dieter was involved in. So there's a lot of moving pieces right now. And, I worry about financial stability in general. So then folks are getting their rents or their mortgages stayed for a while. We are also hearing from our small businesses and our landlords where there's no stay on property taxes. There's no stay on paying your garbage bill. There's no stay on a lot of different things. So they're struggling to keep up their side of the ledger as well. I think folks like Shannon and the really engaged, intelligent people at the state level are looking at this. I feel a lot of it is we're still in this perfect storm a little bit. I thought it was very telling to hear from Shannon that, we hear from the folks who can't enter the unemployment system. Shannon works with the employers that can't find the employees. Where do we get to the middle on this? It's conversations we have a lot. And the interesting conversations that are coming up a little bit with the folks we're talking with, Shannon mentioned that employers can require employees to come, if they're going to come back, to have a vaccine. So that is bringing up a lot of interesting questions as well. There's a lot of comments in our chat as well about living wages still being a critical issue to push forward on. Diane mentioned that the numbers we're discussing right now are gross wages. So, you take those numbers down a little bit. I have a question, Shannon, on you mentioned that when folks get a notice of default, that must include the information about how to access your protections, whether it's to file your intent to go through mediation, that type of thing. And that's something that's required from all lenders. Am I correct? I'm just trying to clarify how this works.
So if a notice of default is filed on an owner occupied home, that notice is required, and that is in the law. And so, you know, the struggle with some of those things is that a notice of default has to be filed in the county. So it's typically a paper process. And, you know, I think there are some institutions that are able to do it electronically, but it is required by law, and Home Means Nevada was responsible for creating those forms. So the homeowner has two options. They can either not respond at all, or they can actively elect to waive their right to do that, or they can actively elect to participate in the foreclosure mediation program. Now, again, you know, there might be those cases where the homeowner says, well, I didn't get it, or I didn't, you know, if you got the notice of default, you probably did get the notice. And I don't mean it that way, but, you know, and on the rental side, not to jump ahead, on the rental side, as part of the new directive, the landlord does have to serve a notice to the tenant saying, these are all the resources available to you. This is the rental eviction mediation program. This is legal aid. These are all, so, you know, that notice component of it is definitely a requirement on both sides now. Again, the struggle with that is, you know, do tenants read it? Do they pay attention? And I don't mean it that way, but you know, there are just some individuals, you know, the ostrich syndrome, they'll just not, they won't read, and they won't fill out what they need to fill out. And that's where groups like Opportunity Alliance and Legal Aid come in to try and help them and emphasize the importance in doing that. But there's just some folks, they won't act.
Right. And we're also hearing that folks are getting 7-day eviction notices as renters and that type of thing. And then we help them go through some steps of looking at, whoa, is this a federally backed property? And we'll find out that there's a Freddie Mac loan on it, and they're still receiving 7-day notices. So I know there's not a lot of answers for this. I'm just trying to say what we're hearing, boots on the ground. Mm-hmm. And I personally had a phone call with a single mother of 4 in Vegas who got her 7-day notice. It was the 5th day. They're telling her to pack up her stuff. I look it up. It's a Freddie Mac back loan. And I tell her, you need to go in and tell them this is, you know, what this is. So I don't know where it works that if someone were to come and lock her out, and then it turns out it's a federally backed loan. But
well, the first step is she should call legal aid. I mean, that really would be the first step. And, you know, the problem here too, and seeing it on so many different levels. And again, you know, we can keep saying that nobody expected the pandemic, and well, we're a year and a half into this now, and this is just me, and you know, I say this with my staff, we're way past that, but we were past that point in April. We have to work, we have to do what we need to do, and we have to move forward. And we've found, even with the landlords, even some of the big quote unquote corporate landlords, like the person that was listed on the lease as the property manager, or the actual owner, or the actual person that could fill out the W-9, even some of these big corporations didn't even know. And so I think it's a reminder on all sides for everybody. I mean, we really need to plan. We don't want to plan for another pandemic, but this is where all these issues get exposed, and where, whether it's workforce development, whether it's housing, whether it's a living wage, you know, as a state. And I know there's plans, and, you know, the governor came out with a new plan based on the American Rescue Plan funds. But, you know, this is where so many of these issues get exposed, and now it's our role to fix them. And that's what, you know, I've always attempted to do on the labor side, and attempting to do on the Home Means Nevada side. But, you know, it is just some, I mean, I don't want to get into specific stories, but just how sloppy and just how bad, I mean, some of the organization in, like I said, just, and so now you try to implement these programs so fast and get them up, and the structures are just not there. And it, like I said, it's a good reminder and a good lesson for, I think, you know, state agencies and other organizations to really have your things in line, and I could use other terms, but I won't because it's early and I'm being polite today. But it really has taught me a lot about you need to have a plan, and you need to have your basic operations and who's responsible and who's managing things and who's collecting the money, all of those things in place all the way down the line. And that's what I'm going to try and do with some of my conversations with some of the industry groups and some of the groups that are representing tenants too, is we all need to row this boat together. There can't just be one person rowing it.
Absolutely. There's a lot of comments in the chat that I'm going to ask people to speak on, but I'm going to just put a question out there that I don't think there's an answer to, but it weighs on me. And it's how my brain works about working in gaps, the gaps between solutions and when an event is going to happen. So if we expect thousands of people to be evicted at some point, we know at one time the Gwynn Center offered up a very large number. Where do we expect them to go? Shelters are full, affordable housing, there is no affordable rents. I just don't know, I'm being very general with my comments. We know from our experience at OANV helping with rental assistance that there's many occasions where it's either multi-generational or just a large number of a family living in one unit. We had many families we work with that were 6 or more. So there's one eviction, but it affects 6 people. I'm just wondering where we send them. What are the options to do with them? Shannon and I talk about this a lot. I know there aren't necessarily really good answers to this, but so my main question is, who in the state will manage this portion of what happens when we have to do things? And I'm just hoping at some point there will be an answer to who figures that out so we can have a conversation with them. The boots on the ground people, the direct services like the Tiffany husbands and those folks, Diane Orgo with the Red Cross, Akia at Cortez Masto's office, they come to us. They ask us. I just like to help them. So I'll leave that there. There's a lot of folks in here that were asking these, thinking the same thoughts. Deb says, the human factor is central to all decisions. And I couldn't agree more. When folks are looking at numbers, this number of eviction, apartment 555 was vacated. I understand that's where a lot of the thought process happens. And then I talked to Shirley, single mother of 4, and I don't know where to send her. So
and I'll just comment on that, Linda. This is, part of the rental assistance piece is there is a segment of what they call rehousing funds, but that goes through, it depends on the county, it goes through typically through the social services and those type of entities. And a lot of these issues they're bigger issues, and the living wage issue. And, I see a question in the chat of kind of, the aggregate number of unfilled positions. If you haven't been on the DEETR website, there is a research and analysis page on there that breaks down the different job categories, average salary, average hourly wage. It's actually kind of interesting, and you can see, the unemployment rate go up and go down. But these are bigger issues, and I know there's groups and entities working on them. I think it's just the challenge of getting, how do you put it all together in one? And I know at the federal level, and I know Senator Masto, they're working on different workforce projects, and it's just, how do you box it all in one? And to your point, Linda, where do you send people? And you don't want to send them to one place where they don't get help. You don't want to run them around, is my point. And that's where I think we all have to try and do our best to at least get them into one place and try and get them the help they need. But there's no easy one-shot answer here. And I wish I could say there was, but there's not.
No, and thank you for that answer, Shannon. And, I have the privilege of speaking to Shannon on a regular basis. And I think, honestly, folks at the state level working on this deserve a tremendous amount of kudos. It's not a simple question. It's not a simple solution, and it's changing. But there's not a lot of constant in the details we're working with either. So I just so appreciate the work happening at a very high level in our state. The access to them, to have conversations, to ask specific questions that I'm hearing on the street. It's been really, in light of the pandemic, in light of all the other bad things and negative things and the blight, I will say Nevada's in very good hands. So Shannon, I just can't thank you enough for coming and sharing this information. Art Dieter is DETR, Department of Education, Training and Rehabilitation, State of Nevada. Oh, there you go. Deb stuck it in there. Nick stuck it in there. Thank you. I'm going to be quiet now for a minute and offer it up for anyone else to comment or ask another question. Please feel free to unmute yourself and jump in, even if it's just feedback for Shannon.
This is Deborah, Shannon, as I heard you speaking, you said that there's a lot of collaboration and communication across from the state to the counties, and you referenced the nonprofits as well. And I was wondering if you have, if you could explain a little more, how are nonprofits currently being notified? That I know that in Clark County, that's where a lot of the attention's going, but I wear the rural hat, and I always think of the nonprofit mafia, if you will, as having the closest connection to people and being much more in touch with them. And I feel like they are so critical to informing people to know what to look for, to understand a process in advance of them hitting that crisis. You know, if they're anticipating that they're going to not be able to meet their obligations. So I'm just wondering how, if you can describe how has there been outreach to the nonprofits, where has that been effective? And what we could do to help that out.
So Deborah, the focus has been, Washoe County, Clark County. Mm-hmm. I would be happy to work with you and Linda can provide you my information. Happy to do more outreach to the rural areas. I think what the issue is kind of, as and I can say this from the Home Means Nevada side, you kind of deal with what's put right in front of your face.
Sure.
So and I'm just saying, on the rural side, from the actual eviction court cases, the volume has just not been there. So there may be a perception even from myself that like, oh, well, it's not as bad out there. And I'm just saying it's not as bad because we're not seeing it. It doesn't mean that the resources shouldn't be devoted there. But, how it's working on the rental assistance side is there's several nonprofits, mainly in Clark County, that literally are kind of basically the first stop for the tenants. And that's an agreement that Clark County has with those nonprofits. I'm working on some things on the Home Means Nevada side to try and, really partner and potentially put some money where our mouth is, excuse the phrase, but to help, people up in Northern Nevada, people in the rural area. It's an issue that it's definitely been on my mind, but like I said, it's just, we haven't seen the volume of cases from the courts in the different counties. And I think a lot of people were surprised by that, good or bad, but we just haven't seen it. So I don't think there's been the push to engage like your organization and some of those entities out in those different areas. But I'm happy to have a follow-up conversation and happy to work with you and start getting that information out there, because it doesn't mean that there's not the same need.
Thank you very much, Shannon. And yeah, I think that's pretty typical of other trending, as the rurals don't often show up on the radar. And I understand completely. You look at what's in front of you, and Clark and Washoe are certainly the ones impacted, probably differently, but in a mass volume. So thank you for that. And I may take you up on that.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
So I just want to highlight that conversation between Deborah and Shannon. This is what I think is so important and so valuable about this forum that OANV can offer. is it brings, such a diverse group together to have these conversations, to talk about the issues, to talk about the solutions, to highlight where there's been a certain demographic in the state that hasn't been attended to like it should. So I just want to thank everyone for their participation in these meetings, for their continued support of OANV, and for being open to joining us at 7:30 in the morning on a Friday. It's very productive, very valuable, and very appreciated. So with that, let's see if there's anything left that someone would like to talk to. We're going on 8:25, being respectful of folks' time. Anyone else with some questions? Shannon, I hope you're seeing in the comments how informative this has been and so helpful. Again, thank you for always being willing to join us and give of your time. I'm happy to provide Shannon's contact information for you for anyone who would like it that doesn't have it. And happy to connect the folks on here with others, however they'd like. Feel free to reach out to me. And let's see. Yeah, great. So that's the end of my conversation, and just a big thank you to everyone for attending and for participating at this level of looking for solutions for everyone in our state.
No, and I just want to say, this is Shannon again. Please reach out to me, and I approach things, if anybody on this call has a better idea, or, I am open to it. And how I like to approach things is sometimes we have to take things block by block by block, and you get one block to work, and then you can build on that block. And so please reach out to me. And this is the time for, we need to do things, and let's do them. And that is the benefit of a nonprofit like Home Means Nevada. As you do, I get to see both sides of being a regulator as the labor commissioner, and then I also get the other side of Home Means Nevada, and knowing sometimes the flexibility that you have and how you can get things done quicker. So I just want to say again, thank you to Linda, and thank you to this group. And I'm absolutely available, so please feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Again, I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and we will be back in 2 weeks to have another wonderful conversation. So goodbye, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.